General Scowcroft, General Zinni, others, would be, including a piece by Dr. Kissinger in this morning's Washington Post, all agree that setting a date for withdrawal would cause us to have severe national security problems in the future. General Jim Jones, Commission, testified before the Senate Armed Services Committee last week that if we set a date for withdrawal, it will have severe national security implications, not only in Iraq, but the region. Look at the region. What do the Saudis do when they feel they have to help the Sunni? What happens when the Iranians gain further and further leverage in the region? What happens as far away as Afghanistan and Pakistan? The Syrians, who are now exporting suicide bombers into Iraq, the lethal explosives that are coming in from Iran, all of that will accelerate, and we will have cause, unfortunately, to return. And I understand, again, the frustration that people feel, but to somehow assert that we've been pursuing exactly the same tactic is simply not in keeping with what we have been doing on the ground. And I'm proud of General Petraeus's leadership, and I'm appalled by the attacks that have been made on him.
Tim, let me answer that, if I may, because it's a very important distinction that's got to be drawn here. John keeps using the word withdrawal, that a fixed date for withdrawal is somehow going to abandon Iraq. We're not talking about abandoning Iraq. We're talking about changing the mission and adjusting the mission so that the bulk of your combat troops are withdrawn ultimately within a year, but that you are continuing to provide the basic backstop support necessary to finish the training so they stand up on their own, and you are continuing to chase al-Qaeda. Now, I think John and others have a fundamental misunderstanding of the relationship of al-Qaeda to Iraq. Number one, it wasn't there. I thought one of the starkest things that General Petraeus said, did this have anything to do with al-Qaeda? Was al-Qaeda in Iraq before we attacked? No, it wasn't, he said. There was no al-Qaeda there. So we are in Iraq today on false pretenses, in the middle of a civil war, expending our troops while Iraqi politicians use us as cover for their own games. And the only way you will change that is to change this equation. When the president says to them, we'll stay as long as it takes, they can make the decision to take as long as they want to make any decision necessary. You wouldn't negotiate the sale of your home the way we're negotiating in Iraq. There's no leverage. We've said we're there. You have to create uncertainty. You have to create leverage. And the only way to do that is say to them, this mission is transitioning. You have to take responsibility for this security over the course of the next year, and we're going to take a different position. Now, there's one other ingredient to that, and it's been missing. You have to surge the diplomacy here, not the troops. There is such a stunning absence of real diplomacy in this effort. Where's Condi Rice? Where is the effort of this administration to be engaged in a standing summit and conference where you go into a room and the president gives the instructions, you don't leave here until you know one of three things. They're either willing to have pluralism and settle these differences and do the passing of these laws, or they're going to live in some kind of a semi-partitioned form where Sunni can't go kill Shia and Shia can't kill Sunni, or it's impossible. A president ought to be demanding those answers. And I believe that what we're doing today, no young American ought to give their life or be grievously wounded so Iraqi politicians can delay making fundamental decisions that they haven't made over 4.5 years. And their constituencies won't let them make them.
You know what John is advocating is to go back to the failed tactic of before. And whether al-Qaeda was there before or not, al-Qaeda is there now. Al-Qaeda is there now. Who blew up the mosque in Samarra? Who just went in the northern part of Iraq and killed 500 innocent, impoverished people? Who is it that continues to set off most of these suicide bombs to try to increase the sectarian violence between Sunni and Shia? It's al-Qaeda. It's al-Qaeda in Iraq.
Is the problem that
could I just finish what I'm saying, please? Yeah, and then
sure.
It'd be, and General Petraeus has said, and I take his word for it, that Iraq is now the central front in the war against al-Qaeda. Now, John and his friends don't believe that. I believe the compelling evidence on the ground indicates that clearly. And to say we're going to have a date for withdrawal in complete ignorance of the facts on the ground, in my view, is a recipe for failure and disaster.
Let me speak to that also. I read and listened to the testimony of John McCain questioning General Petraeus. And John McCain asked him about being the Central Front. And he said, how do you know it's the Central Front? And he said, because I talked to the head of the National Intelligence and another general, and they tell me al-Qaeda says it is their Central Front. Now, al-Qaeda can choose to make it their Central Front, but we're not leaving al-Qaeda to that front. Everything in the Democratic proposal that has 52 votes, a majority of the Senate, says we will leave troops to continue to chase al-Qaeda. That's number one. Number two, Tim, al-Qaeda views Shia as apostates. They are not legitimate Muslims. The fact is, you're better off as a Christian or a Jew than as a Shia in the eyes of al-Qaeda. And Iran, linked as it is already to Maliki, who was in Iran a month ago holding hands with the leader of Iran, they're already linked. The Shia will never allow al-Qaeda to take over Iraq. The Kurds will never allow al-Qaeda to take over Iraq. That's 80 to 85% of the country. And the Sunni in Anbar have now decided they don't want al-Qaeda. We are the attraction for al-Qaeda. And if we begin to reduce our footprint, as the Iraq Study Group has said we should do, as General Jones said we should do, as those 7 soldiers of the 82nd Airborne, 2 of whom were just recently killed, wrote in the New York Times the other day, as we should do, then al-Qaeda, believe me, will be driven out by the Iraqis themselves.
Surely you don't believe that General Petraeus reaches his conclusions by talking to somebody.
I'm quoting
he lives
what
and
General
works
Petraeus
there.
said.
Oh, please.
I'm quoting what he said to you, John.
General Petraeus has said hundreds of times that it is the Central Front in the war against terror and al-Qaeda because of the conditions on the ground, and you are quoting him incorrectly.
No, I'm quoting him absolutely correctly. And moreover, you're not answering the fundamental issue.
When Senator Kerry says that we will just take care of al-Qaeda, then you go into a place where they're fighting. Excuse me, sir, are you al-Qaeda or Sunni or Shia? Please, we've got to have sufficient, and General Jones did say if we set a date for withdrawal, and it's on the record, if we set a date for withdrawal, then United States security interests will be negatively impacted and harmed in the area as well as Iraq. So please don't misquote General Jones again.